Good afternoon, Restoration Chapel, family, friends, Traveling Story, family and friends. We are excited today. We have a very familiar guest. He was on, if I'm not mistaken, episode 5 or 4, somewhere on there. It's been a while, but he was on there back when we were really, when COVID first started, we didn't know what was going on. So, but Chris Galloway, who's the state youth pastor of in the state of South Carolina. He's over our State Youth Ministries, and he's also associate pastor at Rock Hill or Harvest Church of God of Prophecy in Rock Hill, South Carolina. We're excited to have him back on. Chris, I think you are the only person that we have had on by themselves to come on twice. So you're the first one.
Hey, that's great to me. Does that warrant like a trophy or something?
Yes, it's coming in the mail. But no, we are excited to have him on. And last time Chris was on, he gave his testimony, and we kind of did talking about serving and how he gave his life to God and the positions that he's been put in by God and brought up through ministry ranks and different things. But today, because he is our state youth director, and because we're in a time that we're in right now, and not really physically able to meet as state youth or state youth groups or state youth leaders. But I wanted to bring him on so he could come and talk to us a little bit about South Carolina State Youth Ministries. And he has been in this position for over a year now. July was a year. August 1st was a year.
August, yeah.
Yeah, August 1st was a year. A lot's happened in that year.
A whole lot.
And he is, like I said, taking that position and is moving forward with that position. And Chris, can you kind of tell us right now, in through your praying and through your listening, what is your vision for South Carolina State Youth Ministry?
Well, the biggest thing that I pray for, and the biggest thing that I want to see, is a unification of what we have. I want to see people grow, but not just to grow in their own personal space, but to be able to connect us together and unify more of, when I was doing just youth ministry at one local church, besides just my close friend pastors, youth pastors at that time, you were youth pastor in some, Pastor Mark was youth pastor in Chris Brissy, and so we had this tight knit where we could put on events and everyone would kind of get together, and we just kind of bounced ideas off of each other and all, and for whatever reason, just kind of over the last few years, I just kind of seen that separate. And so my biggest vision is that we would see a unification of the churches. The number 2 thing would be that we would see a new birth of passion for people to want to call into ministry or to come into a calling of ministry. One of the biggest things I seen, when I was coming up is when I would see youth leaders and the state youth director, it was Brother Chucky at that time, who was amazing at what he did, because he would always encourage you to follow a calling, that if God had put something on your life, to follow that calling. And so if I had to sum it up, it would be that we unify as a body in this state youth ministries, and that we really find a way to help people to grow into the callings that God has given.
Yes, and as you mentioned, I grew up, not grew up, but I was a youth pastor for 8 years, and I know you were a youth pastor. And at that time, I remember there was a lot, even right before you. I think about Dustin Atkins and
for sure.
Mark Wagnon, and I could just keep naming Chucky Chandler, and then there was some down in the lower state, different ones in the lower state, and we see at this time. We are so divided. But also I think we see at this time, there's not a lot of people that have came after some of those ministers, some of those youth pastors. We have a lot of youth leaders, but not a lot of youth pastors at where we're at this time and stage. in our state. What do you think is that what we need to do to help bring some of those in? I know you talked a little bit about training a while ago and getting a passion and a love for youth ministries. Can you kind of expound on that and kind of talk about how to bring leaders in? What kind of things we need to do as a state, and not just a state, as a pastor. I'm a senior pastor now, and that's something that I want to see is not just my heart. I want to see the whole state flourish, not just Restoration Chapel. We want to see everybody
absolutely
flourish, and if that means somebody from my church is trained up and then sent out, then we're doing what God called us to do. So, what do you mean? What do you think we need to do as a church, as the state?
I think one thing that would help us collectively as a state is to offer opportunity. Something that I hear a lot when I'm going around. Maybe I'll hear someone play a praise and worship song, and I'll just mention, I'm like, man, have you ever asked about maybe leading at your church, maybe leading at a youth event or whatever? And sometimes you find that there's just not a lot of opportunity for them. And so that's a big thing for me, something that I try to focus on. And Pastor Lance, when he was directly with me as my partner, something that we always talked about consistently was when we put on events, we want to find a place that people can have opportunity to stand up there. And because, you and I are both speakers, we both preach. Your style of preaching is different than my style of preaching. Here at Harvest Ministries, Pastor Adkins, his style of preaching is totally different than anyone that I have encountered in this state. And but it all has a purpose with God. And, we can reach different people, but we have to give them opportunity. Number two thing, and sometimes I know it hurts, so I try to say it with as much grace as I can. But we also have to do things that draw people in and would cause them to want to come back and be a part of what we do. A particular church that I went to, was we had people that were there and they would have ideas of ministry. God would birth something in them. And the ones that were allowed to go forward with those ministries, of course, under, you need some guidance, you need some teaching behind you. But when they were allowed to go forward and do what God had put in them, then they would stick around. And in turn, they would be able to encourage others and bring them along with them. One thing I always try to encourage people to do, and actually the piece of advice, several years ago come from Pastor Mark Wagner, as he told me, is when we're training up leaders and when we're trying to get people to have that passion to walk in what God has called them to do, the first thing you have to do is build your personal relationship with them. And Pastor Mark told me one time, he says, when you start out doing this and God allows you to go somewhere, never go by yourself. Always bring someone with you. And because you can encourage that person, you can teach that person, they can kind of see what's going on. But then there's those intimate relational moments that when you're leaving or when you're alone on a car ride, that you can really pour into their life. So one biggest thing for me is opportunity. The next thing is maybe if we try to find ways to gear what we're doing more toward the age that you're trying to reach, and don't be so quick to shut people out. That's kind of a big thing, is don't shut them out. So, opportunity is a huge thing. Where there's no opportunity, people won't stick around. I told Pastor Rocker Neighbors over at the Linhart Church in Easley, one thing I told them that I honored so much about their church, when I watched them on their Facebook live feeds, a lot of times they'll have several of the youth and they'll be leading a praise and worship song, and then Pastor Brown would come back and he would preach behind them. And I remember vividly leaving them a comment one day and telling them, I just believe that as long as you allow them to participate, they'll continue to show up. Because everybody wants to be a part of something.
That's right.
And so just bring them in, love on them, and to another kind of hard thing that I say to people is, you can't just always do nothing but church with young people. You have to do life with them.
That's right.
And if you do life with them, then they get to see you when you're at home. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
anybody can put on the image when they're standing up on a stage, or when they're in front of the crowd. But when you're in the security of your home with your family, you know, you're raw and you're real. And so when you do life with them, they see all the aspects of who you are. And then it's not so much of a burden to say, you know, hey man, that Chris, he's a youth leader, but you know, I seen his 4-year-old got on his nerves. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Because
definitely.
that's a real thing. And when they see that, that kind of takes some of the weight off of them to say, I don't have to be the perfect person, but I
Definitely.
can still walk in the call that God's given me.
That's right. And, you know, and I think about some of the things that you talked about just now. Me and you talked, sorry about that. Me and you talked a little bit about a guest that I had on last week, who's a youth pastor in the Baptist Association.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that he said is we have to do better at giving opportunities to younger people, even in that
Okay.
even in that denomination, because he was mentioning to me, and he's done a lot of history about this and studied a lot about it. But in the 60s and 70s, there was this movement of young ministers at 18, 19, 20 years old that would, get the opportunities to preach and get the opportunities. And we had the Billy Graham movements and the Crusades and all these different things.
Yeah.
And everybody thought they were Billy Graham. Everybody thought they were, speakers, but didn't take the time to train up somebody coming behind them.
Yeah.
And never gave the opportunity to those that in the 90s or the 2000s to give them the opportunity to preach or to minister or things like that. And
Yeah.
it's not just it's not to put the blame to anybody. It was just how they were raised. They were good preachers, good ministers, good teachers. It was
Hmm.
just how they were brought up, and not giving those opportunities to that next level.
Yeah.
And then, as you said about getting people involved, I think I read a stat that said millennials, which they're about out of the youth now, because you're now at what generation Z, I think it is. I think that's what it
Yeah.
is. Jose. But millennials, when they're asked, they want to make an impact. If they're not
That's
making an
right.
impact, then they want to go away from it. You know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
if we're not allowing, and I know Generation Z is probably right there with them. I know they're the YouTube generation, they're the blogger generation, and things like that.
Mhm.
But they want to make an impact. They don't want to just do something just to do it. Um,
That's right.
they want to be able to see change, and not just see change, but be a part of that change. And
Yeah.
so, with that being said, I know we're looking for leaders to bring up, but we do still have some leaders that are still a part, that are preaching and ministering as much as they can, even if it's to one or two students. What kind of
Absolutely.
encouragement would you give to those leaders?
uh, Biggest advice I'd say is keep doing it. You know what I mean? Like keep doing it. Give it everything that you have. If there's one thing I've learned over my years in ministry, it is that if I have one person in front of me, or if I have 300 people in front of me, I have to give it everything that I've got, because you don't know the impact that you're making. You know, I love to tell the story of probably one of what I call one of my greatest accomplishments ever in ministry, actually is a part of your church now. And it's your assistant worship leader, Rebecca Allen. When I started youth ministry, that's what I had. I had two white girls in a fellowship building with about 8 metal chairs and a metal pulpit deal sitting in the corner. And that was it. But I went in there, man, and I did what I felt like God was asking me to do. And two, you have to encourage them to invite more people, but don't be discouraged when they don't come. You know, I, here's something for you. You have to keep going, because you don't know the impact that they're going to make when you're gone. Like everybody tells the story of Billy Graham, but I've read stories about, Billy Graham's Sunday school teacher when he was a small child in a little bitty church where nobody knew who Billy Graham was. Nobody knew who this Baptist church was. Nobody knew this Sunday school teacher. But because he poured into, then Billy Graham arises from that. And so I would tell him, keep going. Um, don't worry about the flash. Don't worry about, having the biggest and the best. Just do everything you can. When I was at the Piedmont church, I used to laugh all the time. My wife would say, "This is crazy," because people would come, and so they would meet me at a youth event, or they'd meet me at a camp, or something like that. And I would give them like Revolution. That was our youth ministry. I'd give them like Revolution T-shirts. I would give them. We made some metal water bottles. We had the pins, the stickers. I think we maybe got some bracelets. Like we just had all this stuff. And so I would give that stuff to all these people, and I'd say, "Yeah, man, come to our youth ministry. Just check it out. You'll love it." And these were leaders. These were youth leaders. And I'd say, "Just come and teach the kids. Just come be a part." And so the funniest part was in my youth ministry, I never knew when I sat out on a Wednesday night, am I going to have one or am I going to have 50? Like no Wednesday was the same. You never got to choose your number. It was whoever showed up. When I drove up on the van, that was who came. And so it would be funny to watch particular youth leaders come in, and there'd be like 4 kids. And they'd be looking around going, "Hold on, dude, you got all this, merchandise, and you're building this thing up like it's the greatest youth ministry in the state of South Carolina." And they walk in and there's 4. Now, the sad side of that is, I won't mention names. Let me turn my speaker off. Okay, sorry. My computer kept dinging. I don't know if you heard it. Forgive me for that. But one of the saddest things that I found in those moments was that hearts were revealed in ministers. Your heart will be revealed, because these guys that would come in and, they'd see me at an event, and I'd bring 15 or 20 kids to an event. And then next week they come in my youth ministry and there's 4, and they're disappointed. And so they don't want to come back. They're not interested in what I'm doing, but not knowing that the very next week there may be 50.
That's right.
And so the biggest advice I would give them is, if God's asked you to do it, just do it. If there's one, if there's more, it doesn't matter. It's more about the impact that you're going to make than the number that you can draw. And that's probably my biggest advice, is just give it everything that you have. And just watch God. That's the deal. Is your success isn't you anyway. It's in your obedience to God. And you can be the most obedient, the most spiritual, the best worship leader, and the best speaker. And unless God gives you that increase, it's not going to happen.
That's right.
And so you just pour out everything you have on whatever He's allowed you. And always remember, when God places them there, He's put them under your care for a reason. You have something to teach them. And now it's up to your obedience with God. Will you teach them, or will you say, because, nothing's more sad to me than when I show up for a youth event. And before I get, so youth pastors, if you're listening, this is to you. When you call me in to come to your youth events, and I'm on my way driving, man, I'm excited because I could care less, right? I'm just going to do something for the Lord. And so they'll call me and say, "Well, brother, there's only going to be about 5. And I'm like, 5? Bro, that's 5 people that can impact the world for God. If I can impact 5 people, and each one of them can only impact one person who continues out, it's just that cycle. And so, don't get discouraged. Don't give up. And you're not going to save the world, right? You're not going to save. Jesus didn't save the world before He passed. Paul didn't save the world. He's a better evangelist than any of us could dream to be. They didn't save the whole world. They just did their part. And so do your part, never give up, and just give it all the passion, that you can muster up, because God will reward your faithfulness and obedience.
That's right. That's right. And with that being said, we have some leaders that are that have a passion. They're preaching to 1 or 2, or they're preaching to 300. But sometimes they feel like they're out there on their own doing it by themselves. I have been blessed, and I know, and I believe you have been blessed too. The pastors that I worked under when I was a youth pastor, they were always encouraging. They didn't see me as just a babysitter. They saw me as leading that next generation up. What would you tell our pastors that are watching this about youth ministry and the importance of youth ministry?
Well, I would say, first of all, that it brings life into your church. That is a big thing to me, is it brings life. The next thing is that it shows people that you're focused on whole family or not just a specific group of people, but you're focused on everyone. And so whatever the Lord is allowing you to do, just do that. Youth ministry to me is absolutely one of the most important things. I'm fortunate enough I get to go to a huge number of our churches throughout the state. And sometimes, man, I do youth events and there's no youth. You know what I mean? Like, I remember one particular one that I did, a youth event for their church. And when I got there, I think there was two kids that were probably, 5 or 6 years old. But man, I gave it everything I had. And I made sure that I stopped and told that pastor, thank you for doing this. Because if nothing else, it showed the people in your church that you care, and that you want to do it. Because listen, it's easy to get discouraged. But, I tell people, unless God's called you into this thing, don't just jump out there, because it can, the weight of ministry can crush your life. It'll crush you as a person if you're not ready to be able to handle that. For me particularly, just what you said, as I was coming up, I was blessed enough to come up under Bishop Barry Manley. And man, he's one of the most encouraging people that you would ever meet in your life. And, he was one that I would sometimes, tell him, I'd say, Pastor, and you're preaching awful hard to these 5 people.
Yeah.
But he would say, son, you never know the impact that's happening. On the flip side, there'd be people in the church that would discount what you do as a youth leader, and that hurts them. No one wants to be told what you're doing is a bad job. Sure. So I would say to pastors that are really trying to figure out what to do, first thing you have to do is you have to find a point person. You have to find that person that all the young people maybe attract to. It may not be your favorite person in the church. It may not be the one that you like the most, but when there's that huge age difference in what you're doing, a 20-year-old guy who, on top of the world and flexing his muscles all the time and driving up with his bumping speakers, he's not going to be the 70-year-old pastor's favorite person. But if when he pulls up, you notice that all the younger people attract to him, then you need to find a way to pull out whatever's there, train them in a godly way that they can lead. Because without youth ministries, man, what are we going to do? Anybody watching this that knows me, they know, man, I'm just point blank, and I try to be honest about it all. And if we're not attracting young people into our churches, not just us as an organization, but the church as a whole, it'll die out, because there's no one coming behind you. I think it was Dr. Miles Monroe before his death. I had read something that he did an interview, and they were talking about leadership with him. And he said the greatest test of leadership is what happens when you're gone. And so his whole concept was, when you step out of it and leave, can it stand? Right. And so my challenge to pastors is, if you stepped out of the way, could your church survive? Right. Is there young people there? Are there people coming behind you that can pick it up and go? Because, man, without young people, look, I love the senior saints. I believe, I'm a person that believes if you have a church that targets all young people, I don't think that's right. If you target all, just teenagers, I think that's wrong. If you target only seniors, I think that's wrong. I think God intended for us all to be together. Right. And so you got to find a way, and being a pastor, man, it's got to be hard to be in a church where there's no young people. But I guess my challenge to them is, like, what are we going to do about it? It's easy to sit back and complain and say, man, we don't have anybody. Look, one of the saddest things I do is I get my directory from the state office, and I begin calling churches, talking about youth events and the different things that we want to do. And man, just to hear some of the sad stories that they give me about the young people and the lack of, I just never feel like it's my place to ask them, Pastor, what are we going to do about it? But in this setting, I would ask them, maybe search yourself and say, what can I do better to try to reach these young folks, because without them.
There we go. With that being said, so what would you give advice to those churches that don't that are looking to reach young people? What kind of things can they start to do to reach those young people?
You can do things that would involve them. Like we're at our church about different ways to reach younger families, and to do more stuff for our teens. And one of the biggest things we're discussing is let's be intentional about when we put on an event. Like, be intentional. Anybody strategist, they just blast it out, hit some. But as I'm saying, shotgun. You think about a shotgun, it just spreads. You just kind of blast it out there, and whatever you hit. But then there's that other side where they call him the sniper, and he's very intentional on. He has a target that he wants to hit. And so I would say be more intentional about what you're doing. If it's a Senior Saints event, then it's a Senior Saints event. You don't need all that. But if you're trying to attract young people, then maybe you got to change what you're doing a little bit so that they would come in. And listen, I'm not saying like change churches and change, what we do. I'm saying that if you decide, hey, this service is going to be youth service. Okay, well, everything from the time they enter the parking lot to the time they get in their car and leave should be intentionally geared toward a teenager, not a 40-year-old, not a 70-year-old. It has to be intentionally geared towards a teenager. And so, it may be something crazy where you just stand out in the parking lot when they're coming in, you're throwing candy at them. I mean, I don't know, anything that would make them laugh, that would cause them to feel a part. Because here's what I know about young people. They struggle with so much stuff in their life right now. There is so much going on in the world that is pulling for their attention and pulling for them to be a part of, that if we don't be intentional and we don't let them have fun and we don't find ways to draw them in, then they're just going to go with that other crowd who's pulling them. And so I would say, man, just find events. It doesn't have to be the biggest event. One of probably my biggest disappointments in myself in my ministry was when I first started out. I was going to have a youth event, and we were going to put on this deal, and so I had this sign-up sheet, and I wanted all the kids to sign up. And mind you, I told you we could have 2, we could have 50. We didn't know from day to day. Well, nobody signed up on my sheet, right? So I was like, okay, well, if you want to come, we're going to have this event, and we're going to have a lot of fun. And so nobody wanted to come. So what I did was I canceled the event. And when I canceled that event, actually the one I spoke of earlier, Rebecca Allen actually called me and was like, hey, what's going on? I wanted to be a part of that. And so that created something in me that said what we talked about earlier. If there's one, or if there's a big crowd, like, you have to give it everything you have, and you have to be very intentional about it. Don't worry about the size of the group. Worry about the impact that you're going to make when they sit in front of you. Because that to me is what matters the most. I can have a crowd of, realistically speaking, I can have a crowd of 50 teenagers in a room, man, and I can just do all this fun stuff, and we can be just so excited, and not one person ever be impacted for Christ. But I can have that same room with just a handful of students in there, and because I was intentional in my planning, and because everything that I did had to be based on the entertainment or the liking of a teenager, then you would make such an impact. And then too, something I've learned over my years is they'll want to come back.
That's right.
That's kind of the biggest thing with church. I tell people, if I go to your church and it's not exciting, you don't have to be crazy charismatic, but there needs to be some level of excitement in what you're doing. If it's not clean, if it's not involved, if it's not intentional, then I might not want to come back there. And if I can look at that in the positions that I stand in and the platforms that I have, and I can say that being honest, then what more do you think it looks like to an unsaved person walking into the door? So be intentional and quit looking for numbers, look for impact.
That's right.
That's kind of the biggest thing.
Yeah, I was thinking about you were at our church one day, and I was having a meeting, and if you know me and you're a leader and I have a meeting, I say, okay, come on into the meeting with me. And Pastor Chris came on in there with me. But I never forget, we were talking about ways that we can reach out into the community and reach people that hadn't been there. And one of the comments were, can't some of our seniors send letters to some of these people? And I think my exact remark was this, but if all our seniors are just sending, then our church looks like it's a senior church. But if we are intentional and say, hey, maybe this young person message this person, or a young person, is a greeter, or a young person is a parking lot attendant, then you're being intentional, like you said, because
That's
now
right.
you're noticing. But now we can go the other way. And I know we're talking about youth ministries, but if you allow your young people to do everything, and you're wondering why you don't have any mentors or anybody that's, hitting it. You know what I'm talking about? You've probably been at those churches too, where, and it's different when it's a youth service, then we understand that completely. But if every single service that all you have is young people doing this, and that, then you're going to have a young church. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But you have to find that middle ground.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And that's a big thing. You got to find the middle ground, because I said it before, but you need everybody.
Right.
One of the, a huge thing that I brought from the Piedmont church was, I actually, told them here at Harvest and every other church I go to when I get to speak or do a leadership deal or whatever it is that, look, I came from the first church that I ever did ministry at. There wasn't a lot of younger people there that could help us. There wasn't a lot of younger people there that wanted to get involved in the ministry. And so we had to be intentional of everything we did had to be geared toward them, but with the understanding that I realized quickly that when I brought this group of kids in, they are unchurched, they are unsaved, they are sometimes just crazy, but these same senior saints that people say, oh, they're just old, and they just sit, man, they would love them. They would teach them. Like, I vividly remember these elderly ladies at the church talking to these teenage girls about boy problems. Who better to talk to a 14 or 15-year-old girl with a broken heart about a boyfriend than someone that's been married 30 or 40 years? You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
They've been through some stuff. And so that's kind of big to me is, man, you need everybody. But don't expect your senior saints to go out and reach young people. How would you feel? I'm talking to the whole world out there who's watching. How would you feel if a 70-year-old white guy or black guy came up and knocked on your door and was like, hey, you got any teenagers in the house? Bro, that's creepy. Nobody wants that in their life. But, if it's a group of teenagers, and to make it fun, like make you a t-shirt, that was something we used to make t-shirts. But one of the cool things that we did that helped a lot of people was we dressed up in costumes for like this year. Right now they have trunk or treat season going on. And in our youth ministry, man, we dressed up in costumes. And one of the coolest things was when you get to the church, some of the elderly people dressed up in costumes too, just to have fun and to hang out. There was nothing evil about it. There was nothing demonic about it. Like, we just had fun in our costumes, just reaching out to the kids. So don't try to make your seniors do the work, because the young people, listen, here's what I know about young people. They lazy. If they can get away with being lazy, they are lazy. And any teenager watching, they know I'm telling the truth, because, we've all been that way. When you're a teenager, you're kind of lazy. You don't want to do a lot. But listen, if God puts something in you, then get out and do it. And don't expect someone else to do what God asked you to do.
That's right. So I know this is going to be a weird question, but I know you because you're like me and we plan ahead big time. Where do you see youth ministries in 5 years, a state youth ministry in 5 years?
In 5 years, one, I hope to see them on the new campground in Marietta. Two, we may still have our campground in Batesburg, but what I would like to see is, right now I don't have a specific number, but I do know it's a very small number of active youth ministries in the South Carolina Church of God of Prophecy. And in 5 years, I would like to see that number to double. So if we have 20, I'd like to see 40. And look, 40 for the amount of churches we have, I'm not exactly sure on the number. I think the last one I heard was around 98 or so churches.
Yeah, somewhere right around 100, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Somewhere right there. So if we're talking about 20 churches, then we're talking about 40, but 40 is not enough. We need to really push it. But my biggest goal for the time that God allows me to hold the position is I want to see us to grow youth ministries within our churches. And so in 5 years, I would like to see more youth pastors. I would like to see that when we put on a youth event, something big that Lance and I have talked about, and now, I'm talking with other people about it, is we should be able to put on an event and call certain people, and the worship team's there, the pastors, the preachers are there, our leaders, our teachers of classes are there, meaning that these people are coming out of churches as youth leaders. Like, we're not having to go out. Look, there's nothing wrong with other organizations. I don't have any problem that we're all going to the same heaven. We're all worshiping the same God. In my version, I say we're all plowing the same field for the same master, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not about that. But if we got to keep going outside of our organization to bring in leaders for our teenagers, then we have to be honest enough to say something's broken there, because we as leaders are not bringing people along. So in 5 years, I want to see more leaders, more youth pastors. I have pastors right now, a couple of them, that are asking me, hey, do you know anybody that maybe would interest in being a youth leader, someone that, you have confidence in, or someone that would want to lead? And, Pastor Bobby, probably one of the saddest things I have to tell him is, I don't know right off. Yeah. But in 5 years, I'd like to be able to just list out names of people and say, hey, this is a group of people, or these people need opportunities. So I'd like to see our youth ministries double. I would see our camping ministries to grow to levels that we haven't seen. I would like to see college and career ministries come along with state youth ministry, kind of incorporate that. So we have big vision, man. God gives me, he's kind of like what you say all the time. He doesn't give me the small stuff. He gives me these great big visions, and then it's up to me to try to convince everybody else that it's not a crazy big idea that can't be done. And so I would, if I was just going out there with God, I would say, I want to see a youth pastor in every one of our churches. Doesn't have to be Chris Galloway youth pastor. It doesn't have to be a Lance Skipper, or they're not going to be a Bobby Winburn or a Mark Wagner or a Chucky Chandler. But man, you got to find your person for your place. And so that's my biggest vision, man, is to see youth ministries to grow to where we're not having, these sad things of people saying, I have zero youth. I have zero young people in my church. I want us in 5 years to be able to say, hey, Restoration Chapel is having a youth event. And then I can just pick up my phone as a state youth director and call certain churches that I know around the area. And your youth event end up with just, massive amount of people, because we have, as I said in the beginning, the vision has matured, that we're now unified. We have more people that are wanting to step into their callings. And so when we're having these events, man, we can just come together. Because you know what, just telling them this, and I don't even know why, I'm just dropping it on them, but that's how I met you, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Is at a youth service. I didn't really know anyone in the church. I was new to the whole youth ministry leadership type thing, doing praise and worship. But you know what? I went to a youth service at the Anderson Belmont Church with Bishop Rhodes, and I forget the young man's name that was there, because was his name Wayne?
Wayne, that's right. Yeah.
Wayne was a youth pastor at that time. So I went there that night. I met Wayne. I met you. I met Chris Brissy. And so, but that was just all these different youth groups coming together. So, 5 years, man, I want to see that stuff back to where we're just having these youth services, youth rallies, and everybody's just coming together. Because we've been doing our own thing for too long, and it shows. Can I say that from the state platform? It shows when we put on state events, and our youth groups show up, and our youth pastors don't know each other, or our youth groups, you'll have this group sitting over here and that group over there and this group in the back, and they just stay together the whole time because there's been no connection.
That's right.
So I'm going to exhaust myself until I no longer have that position to see those things come to pass. Because, man, I want to see the big things happen.
Definitely. And I'll say this, I've met most of my friends that are now pastors or leaders somewhere else. I met them because they were youth pastors, and
Sure.
we came together for events such as the core that we were a
Yep.
part of, that me and you, and Chris Brissy and Tim Register that we would pour into. The events at Belmont, I forgot the name of them because it was, good Lord, it seems like it's been
It's been a long time,
long
bro.
time, but those events, and I was telling you about some guys when I first got started, such as Mark Wagner, and what Chucky's been around for everybody, so Chucky
Yeah.
Chandler, Dustin Atkins, who's not in our organization no more, but I remember him trying to take me under his wing a little bit, tell me some things. He's at Piedmont Church. You got to practice.
I was going to say he helped me tremendously, through some things that I struggled with. And we just got to get that back, So we're calling you out, youth pastors and pastors. We're calling you out that you need to start doing events again. Like that's kind of the thing. When's the last time a actual youth ministry had a lock-in?
Yeah.
Think about that. Now, look, it's crazy. It's absurd. You're going to be up all night and you're going to be tired and wore out. And I hope you like energy drinks because you got to do it. But you know what, man? That was, for me, when I did youth ministry, we had a lock-in. We tried to do 2 a year. As I got wiser and realized how crazy that was, we backed down to 1 a year. But those are some of the biggest things that we did. And, man, it was great because, I remember, like, I could call you. You'd bring some kids over. I would call Tim Register. He came over. Chris Brissy. And these names we're using, they're just the people that are in the local churches around us.
That's
You
right.
know what I mean? But you're going to find people like, I remember, meeting Lance Skipper. Though he was my partner in State Youth Ministry. He's one of my best friends. We talk on the phone like schoolgirls, man. It's way too much. But I met Lance Skipper because when Chris Brissy was being a youth leader at the Liberty Church, he put on an event that he invited Lance to speak at. He invited Sherry Collins and myself and us from Piedmont to do some praise and worship. I think your group even came there.
Did dramas, if I'm not mistaken.
Did something there. And so, but that's what formed the connection. And now the problem that I see is if a church puts on an event, I find out about that event when I see the pictures posted on Facebook or Instagram. You know what I'm saying? And so there's got to be that connection. That's just so big.
And I'll say this too, and I know you'll agree with me, as youth leaders, don't be afraid to go to another person's event because you're worried that they're going to take your children.
Oh yeah.
I never, and I remember when I was a youth pastor, and I know the same for you and our youth pastor at Restoration Chapel, Courtney James and Mark, and we can just go down the list. Listen, everybody has their niche, everybody has their thing. But don't be afraid that if I go to this church for this youth ministry, that they're going to take my kids.
No, that's great.
Because we're not going to unify together, as you said. It pushes you sometimes. You'll go and see somebody's youth ministry. And there's things, and I know me and Pastor Chris talk about this all the time. Sometimes you have to take the bones out and eat the meat.
That's it.
And there's some places that you'll go and there'll be some meat that you can take back with you, or some vision of, hey, that was cool. Let's keep building up to that, keep building up to those times, but don't be afraid. Because when you're afraid, the kids see it, and you're more likely to lose those kids because of that.
Yeah. And if you build that relationship with them,
definitely.
I used to tell people all the time, I had some large gatherings in our youth ministry, and man, I would take those kids anywhere. Like if somebody called me and said, we're having a youth event, I would try to get as many kids as I possibly could to go. And I never worried about someone trying to, say, hey, they're going to come to this church. Now, listen, the first thing you got to understand is church is voluntary, right?
That's right.
they're going to go where they want to go. They're going to do what they want to do. What I always said when I first started out, man, I bought flashing light. This is not a knock on anybody who does anything, because look, I'm down with all of it. You all know me. I'm down with everything. But I bought some lights. I bought the little machine that would make those lights flash. I built a game room, brother. I bought an Xbox and had TVs, and I had it all, man. I'm telling you, like, I just went out and I was buying all this stuff, and I built this whole room and this whole thing. And I was like, yeah, because all the kids are going to come to the church. They all came to the church, right? And they loved it, and we had fun. Here's what happens. The lights burn out, and no, one of them burnt out. So when they would flash, it looked really awkward. So you don't want that. We didn't have money in my youth ministry, so you couldn't just go buy more, like that was the end of the lights. The video games, the kids I was bringing in, they tear up the video games. The video game don't work anymore. But here's what I noticed. No matter how much of that stuff I bought, and no matter how much I did, when that stuff was gone, they were gone, because that's what they hinged on. Right. But when I started, I said, you know what, this has got to be more intentional, and it's got to be more relational. And that's when it really started, happening for me. It's the relational aspect. You can't, look, I've been married 13 years, so I'll just use the aspect of my wife. I tell her how much I love her. I tell her how beautiful she is. I tell her she's the greatest thing in the world. So then if some other cat comes down the road and says, girl, you look good, she doesn't care what you say. Like, she hears it all. So if you have teenagers and you are giving them your life, you're just putting yourself out there. When they need trouble, you're the first one that they can talk to. You're not afraid to, go to their house, show up at their ball game, go to the birthday party, just anything you can do to be in their life. And I can promise you that if you build that type of relationship, you can take that kid to any church, to any event, and they can have the biggest thing that's ever went on. And when church time comes back around, they're coming back with you. Because it's not about the building, it's not about the entertainment. It's going to be more about that relationship that you build.
That's right. That's right. Well, with that being said, Pastor Chris, there's some is any event, I know with COVID, winter retreat is kind of shut down for this.
COVID shut down the whole world, bro.
Yeah,
my whole schedule, everything we were doing. Look, Pastor Lance and I, before he got called into the different area that he's called in, and just to clear that, God just kind of shifted his focus. It's nothing to do with youth ministries. It's not that he didn't love it, it's just that God shifted his focus to what he's doing. But we have some big plans. The only thing that I can tell you right now is that whenever COVID was kind of at the height, we had college and career retreat planned, and we already had everything kind of going in that direction. We had a leadership weekend that we were planning to bring in just youth pastors and aspiring leaders of youth. And we were going to bring them into the Marietta campground there at Living Springs. And we were going to do an event there. Of course, we had the youth retreat going to come up. Pastor Lance and I actually came up with, we were going to do like a film festival type thing where youth groups kind of make short films of, and we're going to do like sitcom stuff. But man, all that stuff got just canceled. And it's wisdom, you can't be mad about it. It's got to be wisdom.
Definitely.
Not that we live in fear, but we have to be wise people. But I would say just, you probably won't see anything coming up until we are released in the state office to be able to do stuff. I know the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to be contacting, so you youth pastors that are listening, I'm going to be contacting youth pastors and young leaders. You don't even have to have a title, but, if you aspire to be a youth leader, people like, if you're watching Chop Collins, that's the kind of people I'm talking about. Jaquavius from the College Park Church. These are the guys I'm talking about they are great young men of God. They love God. They honor God. And so we're going to actually plan back as soon as we're free. We're going to plan an event where we bring in our youth pastors and youth leaders to the Marietta campground, and we're going to put on, we want to do a whole weekend. If we're not able, we'll at least do a couple, a day and a half, but some leadership training, some things to try to help people to understand their calling, to answer their calling. You'll have that coming up. And man, so sad that the youth retreat is canceled for November, but we're going to do something. You know what I'm saying? It may not be, the actual youth retreat itself, but as soon as I'm free, we're going to do a weekend um, event like a youth retreat, because, with all the stuff that got canceled, I have so many plans and notebooks over here in this drawer down here in my desk. I have plans on top of plans. You actually were on schedule to preach this youth event that would be coming up in the next couple of weeks. But we're not going to do that. We thought about doing virtual, but let's just be honest. Virtual youth event is just not the same. I mean, it's good, but you're talking about kids that are YouTubers, TikTokers, man, for them to sit and watch youth services, you're probably not going to get as much engagement as you want. So we want to do it back live. So we're going to have a weekend as soon as possible. January, I don't know if it's been canceled. I don't think it has. We were only canceled through the remainder of 2020. But everyone don't forget January. Something that Bishop Howard Matthews started up last year was that during our prayer summit. So we had a prayer summit each Sunday night of January, 4 locations across the state of South Carolina. And at each of those, we had a youth service. And I can just tell you I did 2 of those. Pastor Lance did 2 of those. This year, I'll be doing them all. So I hope you like me, because I'm going to be at all of them. But we were so encouraged by that, man, because youth leaders and they just showed up, and youth showed up, and at every event had youth at the event. And I don't think that we had one that was less than probably 25 kids. And I think the largest one was somewhere around 65, 70 in that room. So I know in January, the prayer summits, if they're still on, then we're going to be traveling around the state doing that. But somewhere between January and our state convention, don't forget this will be convention year coming up in 2021. And so we'll have a youth booth, and we'll have Friday night youth service there. And we're going to try to do some pretty big things there with that. But we also want to have something in between that, since we've missed so much this year. So all I can tell them is, go to the Facebook, go to the Instagram, the hashtag SCYM, and just find us, South Carolina Youth Ministry, and just keep up with it, because there's events coming. We just have to be wise with COVID, and, virtual stuff is good, man. I love the virtual stuff, but, if we're going to put on big event, I would rather it be in person. I just feel like that's more impactful. I feel like you're going to get a better response from it. So just stay tuned, hopefully January comes and we can do those prayer summits. That would be a real big kickoff. And so I would encourage everyone, youth pastors and youth ministries, to find out where these prayer summits will be at. We'll be sending you all that information, and find the one that's closest to you, bring a youth group, and look out for Leadership Weekend. We're definitely going to do that. That's something big, because we want to build that team of people that I talk about. And then state convention, that's going to be a big thing. That's something that we really want to step it up this year. Not that it hasn't been, good in the past or anything, but we just really want that to be, that's once every 2 years. So we want to find a way to just completely go outside the box and then just have something really special.
Definitely.
So just stay tuned and stay involved.
Definitely. And I'll tell you, I was able to minister at the prayer summit for the youth at
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Carolina Heights.
That was it.
That was a packed room. I mean, I think that was the night you had 70, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that was the largest one that we had. And you know what? That's you know me. If we come again in January, I've already told Tim Steen, who is the leader there, he calls it Sparks Junior Ministry. I told him, I was like, man, if we do this here next year, you're going to have to put us out in that bigger room, because if we can bring, 70 in, then I believe it increased, and we're going to do our best to bring in so much more. So yeah, man, I tell them, just stay tuned, because look, this year has been, none of us can do anything about it. It's the COVID, man. It's just run rampant. And because of wisdom, we have to shut down a lot of things. But if you stay tuned, there's going to be a lot going on. We're not going anywhere. We're not backing up. Nobody's, quitting on it. You have youth leaders, and they're going to do their best to put on some really good events that would impact your lives. And also, while we're here, I would say, last thing I'll say is, I want to encourage pastors of the churches, you pastors that are watching, let's do some youth events.
That's right.
Like that is so big to me, because we may not be able to have it on the scale of the youth retreat last year, where over 300 people are packed down there in that little spot in Batesburg. But you know what? We can come to a particular church, and we can bring in, don't be afraid of that. If you need ideas and help how to get youth in there, just reach out, man. We'll help you in anything we can. If it's a financial thing, I know that's embarrassing to a lot of churches. They don't want to talk about can't do a youth event because they don't have finances. The Lord has just graciously blessed our state youth ministries that we're able to have some finances. And so, we're not afraid to just get in there with you and do the dirty work and, get out on the streets, put the financing in, whatever it takes. But let's just don't sit back and do nothing. Let's do something and put on youth events, and invite people. And look, if you're the Church of God of Prophecy, one thing I know for sure, unless you're like Lance Skipper's church in Gloverville, the church closest to him is like an hour and a half, so I give him a pass sometimes. But one thing I know about the Church of God of Prophecy is we have a lot of churches in this state, and they're not, there's a church near you somewhere. So when you do an event, and look, I'm saying this as a state youth director, but I can say this just as a leader in general. When you're putting on an event, invite your brother and sister down the road to come and be a part of that, because that overall helps us all in that unification that we're trying to see.
That's right. So this is my challenge for each one that watches this. And I'll put the links down below. I'm probably pointing at it right now over that way. But go to Instagram and like SC Youth Ministries, right? COGOP Youth Ministries. Go to Facebook, like that also. If you have either one, like those, because that's where you're going to get a lot of your information at. Also, that's the way you can contact Pastor Chris or anyone on the youth staff there. You can get there. And you can't say you don't know if you like those, because it'll come out. It'll be there.
Yeah.
For anybody that watches that, pastors, youth pastors, you go like it, and then you let your people know, hey, this is what's going on. Definitely.
Right.
Pastor Chris, and then they try to even share things that are going on at different ministries around the state too. So, send Pastor Chris an email or Pastor Chris a message, and he'll share your stuff also. He'll try to get as much advertisement, out there as he possibly can on his side too.
Yeah. And if you need help getting in contact with a particular church, or maybe you don't know who's near you, man, just give me a call. I have every phone number of every pastor and every address of every church in this state. That's nothing to brag about. I'm just saying we have that at our disposal, so let's use it. And man, let's just come together. Let's just do something special, because that's what it's all about.
Definitely. Well, Pastor Chris, I want to thank you so much for jumping on and doing this.
Yeah, man. Thank you for doing it.
We always have a great time for you to when you're jumping on. Any last words for the people that not last words? I hate when I say that, because you're not dying.
I know, right, bro? You just killed me off. It's like
any words for the
biggest thing I would say, anyone, youth pastor, it doesn't matter. You're in trying times. We got a lot of craziness going on in the world. Stay true to who God called you to be. Stay true to who you are at the core. Don't waver from anything that God has asked you to do, and give it everything you got. Don't worry about numbers. Worry about impact, because that's what really matters.
That's right. Well, Pastor Chris, I'll say this from my heart. I know you're a friend of mine, but you're more than that. You're an asset to our denomination and our state, and we thank you so much for all that you do. I know Raquel thanks you so much for all that you do. I'm glad that you're there, but I hate it because we can't have our lunches together anymore to talk about ministry.
I know, man.
But no, man, I'm excited for you, and I'm excited to see where State Youth Ministries is going to go. From here on. I believe God's trying to do something big, and he will do something big if we will just rely on him and just listen to him and just allow him to continue to do that. I also want to say thank you for watching this today. How can you help us out? You can share this. Share it. It's on Facebook. It's on YouTube. Share these videos out. Everybody wants to see Pastor Chris's face. Share it out, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if they don't want to see it, share it with them on purpose.
Yes, definitely.
So I can smile.
That's right. Young people that are watching this, share this to your youth minister so they'll know, hey, this is what's coming up. This is where State Youth Ministries is coming.
Yeah. And if you're a youth and you have a youth pastor that says, I don't really know him, get them to call me. All right. Talk to me, because I want to help you. I won't say a particular name, but I've seen a youth leader on Facebook. You know who you are if you're watching. And I sent them a personal message and told them, hey, I don't know you. I've never met you, but I'm the state youth leader. I see what you're doing, and I want to help you grow. Man, I ain't going to say they didn't say nothing, Pastor Bobby.
But yes.
Hey, I love you. I love you, man. I thank you for what you do, for sure. I thank you for it. It's very impactful to many people I know.
Definitely. And share this. You can also listen to this on Spotify or Google Podcast, on Apple Podcast, on Anchor. Somebody told me the other day, something Adobe, something. I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know. So anywhere where you get podcasts, just to look in Restoration Chapel, Traveling Stories, follow it, subscribe to it, whatever you need to do. We try to have these once a week, and we love for you to listen to us. There's a lot of good information that comes out, such as, this or different people that come on. We've had many different guests, and we love each and every one of them. And again, we enjoy just sitting around and talking and chatting. And with that being said, we've told our story today, told our story about youth ministries. Now you go tell your story so that people that are far from Christ can hear how great God is. So go out and tell your story today. God bless you. We love you, and we will see and talk to you soon.